This week's blog post is on the Worcester Art Museum, European Portraits Part 1. In June 2023, I visited the Worcester Art Museum to see an exhibition of Impressionist art just before it closed. I really didn't expect to find much beyond that. Worcester, Massachusetts, population 200,000, has not come on my radar as a major destination for art lovers. Well, color me surprised. The Impressionist paintings in the exhibition didn't thrill me, but I discovered that the Worcester Art Museum has a remarkably good collection of European and American paintings, thoughtfully chosen to illustrate most major periods of European and American art. The Worcester Art Museum, like the Metropolitan Museum in New York, was founded by a group of prominent local men. It opened its doors in 1898, and, again like the Metropolitan, it began in one small building, expanding as its collections grew. Over the course of the 20th century, the Worcester Art Museum's earliest acquisitions of plaster casts of ancient Renaissance sculptures were joined by major collections of Japanese prints, by a 12th century chapter house from a French monastery, by Roman mosaics from Antioch, and by the second best collection of arms and armor in the U.S. Look at that helmet. That's just amazing. And of course, there is also a significant group of American and European paintings. For my current research project, I'm interested in the progress of portraiture in Europe and the U.S. So in this series of posts, I'll be looking at portraits in the Worcester Art Museum, not room by room, but in chronological order. This post includes European portraits of the 1500s with examples from Italy and France. Incidentally, I like seeing paintings in their frames, so the illustrations in this series of posts that include frames are ones that I took. Images without frames are from the Worcester Art Museum site or from Wikipedia, as noted. First up, from the mid-1500s in Italy, a portrait by Ridolfo Ghirlandaio, possibly. The identity of this benign-looking clergyman, I love his slight smile, is no longer known. Portraits were almost unheard of during the Middle Ages, and they certainly weren't done for clergymen who were expected to avoid the sin of vanity. But during the Renaissance, i.e. beginning around 1420, portraits became enormously popular. This one is very much in the style of a late 15th century portrait. It's bust length, with the figure's head at the center and shown in three-quarter view, which is halfway between profile and full frontal. By the time this was painted, the type of portrait that's coming up in our next example was far more common. But Ridolfo Ghirlandaio, 1483 to 1561, the artist to whom this painting is attributed, was the son of Domenico Ghirlandaio, one of the most prominent painters of the late 15th century. From early training and family pride, Ridolfo probably chose to continue executing the earlier style of portrait. And here's the type that was going on, at more or less the same time that Ridolfo did that one. This portrait of Giovanna Chiavara and her son Giovanni Montalvo was executed not long after the Ghirlandaio portrait. With small heads and elongated limbs, mark it as in the style of Agnolo Bronzino, a leading Mannerist painter. Giovanna, a Spaniard, was a member of the court of Eleonora of Toledo, who was wife of Cosmo de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. On your right is a portrait of Eleonora of Toledo, executed by Bronzino himself some 15 years earlier. It's now at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Is it the sitter or the artist that makes this one so much more memorable? And the third and final one that we'll look at this week, done circa 1580, in France at the court of Henry II, considerably more risque paintings were being created. This boudoir painting of an unknown lady at the court is modeled after similar works by France's leading court painter, François Clouet, whose work is on the right. And next week we will look at Dutch portraits of the 17th century. I just wanted to say a few words about why I'm doing this series on portraits. For the Resurrecting Romanticism Conference in October 2023, I'm working on a talk on art at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which was also known as the Columbian Exposition. One of the questions I'll be addressing is why the organizers of the conference and the painters whose works appeared there were so very keen to surpass the buildings and the exhibitions of the 1889 Paris World's Fair. This series of posts will survey European portraits from the Renaissance to the 19th century and then American portraits. Eventually I'll be posting on other paintings at the Worcester Art Museum. DianeDuranteWriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, architecture, and my other obsessions. To join the Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL on the screen or email me. And you can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on DianeDuranteWriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.